All right, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Bava Daf Lamed Aleph, and we're starting about 12 lines or so from the bottom of Lamed Amid Beis, 3 lines into the wide lines at Lema Kahani Tanoi. We just had a machlokes at the top of the page, and the machlokes was very interesting. It was about Kol HaKodem Zacha Behen, that if a person decides to take straw or anything like that, they put it outside of their private property into Rishus HaRabim so that it could get muddied and filled with things that will help the grass grow, manure, whatever it may be. Kol HaKodem Zach, everyone's allowed to take it. So that means that I put my property out there. You see that I've done that. You can literally take a shovel and take some of it. What can you take? That's the machlokes Rav and Zeiri that we saw at the top of the page. And just take for a moment, just 2 seconds to look at the top of Lamed Amid Beis at the 2 dots there. Amar Rav says, Bein begufan, bein b'shivchan. You can take the principle and you can take the appreciation. Zeiri Amar, yes, you can take b'shivchan, aval lo begufan. And let's get started with our Gemara today, which is 3 lines into the wide lines, where the Gemara says, Lema kahani tanoi. Perhaps the machlokes that we have between Rav and Zeiri, Rav who says you can take all of it, the gufan and the shivchan, the keren, the principle and the appreciation, whereas Zeiri says only the appreciation. Maybe it's like the following. Hamoti tivno v'kasha l'rshus harabim lizvalim. If a person puts out their straw into a public domain for the sake of creating some type of manure, v'huzak bohen acher, and someone else gets damaged, the halacha is chai benisko. He is you, the person who put out the teven, are obligated in the damages that you caused. And v'chol hakodem bohen zacha, everyone's allowed to take that mixture of items that you've left outside in the Rishus HaRabim, ve'asur mishum gezel, and no one is allowed to steal it. The little cryptic, what does that mean? You can take it, but it's not gezel. Okay, we'll get there. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Kol hamekalkel in Rishus HaRabim v'ziko chayav l'shalim. Anything that causes damage in Rishus HaRabim, and there's damage, then chayav l'shalim, you have to pay. V'chol hakodem bohen zacha umutar mishum gezel. How are we interlinking the gezel and the kol hakodem bohen zacha? So let's just get something clear here. Kol hakodem bohen zacha means that if I put the straw out in the public, you can take part or all of it. Rav Zeiri, you can take some of it. But what is the aspect of gezel that is brought up in different ways between the Tana Kama and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? So says the Gemara, Hagufa Kasha. There's a stira right within the Brisa itself. It says, Amris, Kol HaKodem en Zacha, v'hadar kamar asur mishum gezel. The Tana Kama said, Kol HaKodem Zacha, but it's asur to take, because those 2 things are opposites. Elalab says the Gemara 6 lines from the bottom on Lamed Amid Beis, really hachi kamar. This is what's going on. V'chol hakodem bohen zacha b'shivchan. We add in the word b'shivchan. Really, what the Tana Kama means that you can take the shevach. Ve'asurin mishum gezel. That's agufan. So we see that the language is bifurcated. We have on the one side the mutter component, which is taking the appreciation. That's okay. What you're not allowed to do, what's asur mishum gezel, is the shita that says you can't take the gufan. That's what it means. Asur mishum gezel is agufan. That is zeiri. And then ve'asur Reb Shimon ben Gamliel lemeimar afilu gufan nami kol hakodem ben zacha. So that's what we see is this line in the sand, that the Tana Kama is of the opinion that you're allowed to take the shevach, you're not allowed to take the gufan. That's why he says kol hakodem ben zacha is in regards to the shevach, but the asur mishum gezel is on the gufan, on the principle. Ma'ashe'en kein, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says no, they can take everything. So says the Gemara, unique answer. The Gemara says, the Gemara says 4 lines from the bottom. L'zeiri, according to Zeiri, that's definitely how he would learn this Mishnah. Vadai Tanoihi. There's no question that he learns the Tana Kama and Reb Shimon ben Elazar accordingly. And what made us learn this way was this unique language of Asr B'hen Mishum Gezel and Mutter B'hen Mishum Gezel. But the Rav, it could be that according to Rav, that there's another thing going on in this brisa. L'Rav, mi lema Tanoihi. Are we forced to say? Do we have to say that there's actually a machlokes Tanoim? Amar lach Rav, what would Rav say? To kule alma kansu gufan mishum shivchan. Maybe everyone agrees, both the Tana Kama and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, that we allow the principle to be taken in addition to the appreciation, but perhaps v'hacha behalacha ve'ein morin kein kamiflagi. Perhaps over here we're dealing with something else, which is, yes, this is the halacha, but no, we don't paskin this way for the masses. That would be an interesting distinction. And perhaps the Tana Kama is strict and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is lenient. Perhaps that's what's going on here. And really, no, maybe there is no machlokes, at least through the lens of Rav. Maybe there is no machlokes of whether or not you're allowed to take the principle. Maybe everyone agrees you're allowed to take the principal just as well as you can take the appreciation. So that was the answer that he gave. And we have a machlokas about halacha ve'ein morinkein. Rav Huna amar halacha ve'ein morinkein, that in our case it is taka the halacha, but ve'ein morinkein, we don't publicize it. Rav Ada bar Ava amar halacha u'morinkein. Says the Gemara, Eini, how can you possibly say, this kasha we'll soon see is going to be on Rav Huna, where it says halacha ve'ein morinkein? How can Rav Huna say halacha ve'ein morinkein? But Rav Huna, afkir chushli. Rav Huna was of the opinion in regards to being mafkir chushli. Chushli, if you look in Rashi, 4 lines from the bottom of the page, se'orin klufin, it's peeled barley. I think that's what we eat. I think our barley is peeled barley. I think that's what it is. We remove the outer, we don't, but we get bags of pearled barley. What? Oh, so I think that's what we're talking about. And Lamaisa, what happened in that case? Apparently, Rav was matir in such a case. That's what you look at the end of Rashi. That Rashi says, Rav Huna v'hore shakodem en zacha. In that case of the peeled barley, mutter. So Rav Huna a line ago said halacha ve'ein morinkein. Yet over here by the chushli, we see he is more of a halacha of a morinkein. Rav Ada bar Ava afkir slikusta. He also allowed people to take slikusta. Rashi tells us what slikusta is. It's psoles itzure tmarim sha'asu mehen shechar. It's the remnants of dates after making date beer, and that too was called kodem en zacha. So bishlam Rav Ada bar Ava kishmaise. Rav Ada bar Ava makes perfect sense. The reason why Rav Ada bar Ava said you're allowed to take the leftovers of the beer dates, of the dates that you use for beer, is because he holds halacha morinkein. But according to Rav Huna, lema hadarbe. Perhaps Rav Huna would have to change his mind. Maybe he changed his mind over the course of his halachic psak years. Things like that happen. When I was in Shalvim, there was one of the Rabbeim there. He used to go through this beautiful mahalach where he would show Amoraim, the same Amora would change his mind numerous times based on the cities that they lived in. It was a beautiful mahalach. I remember, it was 25 years ago, but I remember him showing this beautiful mahalach of I think Rabinovich, Rab Nachum, I can't remember his last name. It was a beautiful word. Anyways, the Gemara says Kasha and Rav Huna, because Rav Huna seemed to have allowed, in regards to the chushli, the peeled barley, it would seem to be halacha morinkein, but in our case, he said halacha ve'ein morinkein. So which one is it? Was Yihad Arbe? Says the Gemara, Hanhu Musar and Havu. These people were warned many times. If it only happened once, then it's halacha ve'ein morinkein. But once you're being this guy, you're throwing the weed out every other third day. Please stop. You're being annoying. Stop already. So at some point, Rav Huna is like, okay, stop it. Kol hakodem en zacha. Anyone, you can go to Karesh's house. He's being ridiculous. He's not listening to Bezin. You can take anything from the front of his lawn. No problem. So that's how the Gemara concludes. And what that therefore means is that we don't yet have another Raya in the Tanaim to support the Machlokes Rav and Zeiri. Let's just review their shitas, and then we'll move on to the next Mishnah. The Mishnah had said yesterday, and what we're summarizing over here is that if I take my straw and put it out in the Rishus Harabim to collect, to become manure. So Rav says, I can take a shovel and take all of your property, not only the shvach, not only the appreciation, but also the principal, even the straw. Masha'en King Zeiri says you're only allowed to take the shvach, and we have no source in the Tanaim to back up these shitas. That means that this machlokes is only in the Tanaim, only in the Amoraim, excuse me. That brings us to a new mission on the top of Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph. Let's continue. Shnei Kadorim, there are two people who were pot makers. They were walking one in front of the other. V'niskal Harishon, the guy holding the first pot trips, he falls over. And V'nafal, he falls over. V'niskal Hasheni Berishon, and then the second person trips on the first person. Right, so we're walking in sequence. By the way, this is a great way to learn a sugya about who's responsible for damage when you're driving. If the first person slams on the brakes and you hit them, whose fault? In American law, it's always the person following. Keep a distance. Mm-hmm. So I would imagine from this sugya that that's not the case. Halacha l'maisa, doesn't matter. It's din d'malchus adina. You have to be whatever the rule is. But let's learn about it for halachic purposes. We can kind of keep that in mind. So Shnei Kadarin, the first guy is he's a craftsman and he trips. Guy number 2 falls on him. What's the din? Harishon chayav b'nizkei sheni. So the guy, this is totally the opposite of our standard law of driving. The first guy who tripped is responsible for the second guy who now has damage. Amar Rav Yochanan, lo tema masneis Rav Meir he. It cannot be that our Mishnah is Rav Meir. What did Rav Meir say? The Amar niskal poshehu b'chayev. That would be too obvious. If Rav Meir says that a person who trips is a klutz and therefore is always held accountable, then pashut that he's going to be chayev for guy number 2. That should be obvious. What?
Why is it if you fall and I trip, if you trip and then I fall over you?
It's not an. I am what you tripped over. Agrama is indirect damage.
Okay.
I am what you tripped over. That's not indirect. That's direct. I'm the mazik. And because the falling was my fault, according to Rav Meir, I am a mazik. It's not grama b'nizakin. But says the Gemara, that would have been easy peasy. That our Mishnah is like it's simply like Rav Meir. Ela filu leRabbanan. Our Mishnah could even be like the Rabbanan de Amrei who say anus hu pater. Even if the person falls, he's an ones. Here they'd still be chayiv. Hacha chayiv shahaylo lamod v'lo amad. Get up. Get up. What's your problem? Get up. So if I'm person number one and you're person number two and I fall, so says the Gemara, even the shita of the Rabbanan who says that falling is an anus, you'd still be chayav because you need to get up. You have an achrayas to the people behind you. If you fall, you have to stand up.
How much time?
We're going to discuss iterations, but not about time. We're going to talk about the ability to stand versus the lack of ability to stand. And Rav Nachman argues. Rav Nachman says you're chayav, but not because of that. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar afilu tema lo haylo lamud. Even if he didn't have enough time to stand, it was a very the person was was right on your tail. So haylo lahasir below his. You should I fell. Be careful. One way or the other, the burden of responsibility is on person number one. So what does that mean, Lamai? So let's use a car scenario. Let's say that my tire blows out and I don't have time to move my car, but I could get out of my car and wave you down. L'chora, that's my achrayas. And if you hit me, it's my fault. That's what's implied from the Gemara, one way or the other. Says the Gemara, this we need to analyze. Rav Yochanan, what would you say back to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak? He would say, Rav Yochanan Amar kevan de lo haylo lamod, lo haylo lahazir tetarid. If he can't stand up, obviously he's nursing his wound. Something is wrong. He also probably doesn't have the headspace to start making announcements and dropping flares and sending text messages. He's hurt, whatever. He's out of capacity. He's done. He's down for the count. So now we have to analyze this piece a little bit because we've analyzed our Mishnah to say that our Mishnah could be both like Rav Yochanan and like Rav Meir, but we have to figure out why it is that person number one is held accountable. Is he held accountable because he should have stood up, or is he held accountable because he should have been mazhir? He should have verbally warned the person behind him. Third of the way down on Lamed Aleph, Amid Aleph, 4 lines into the wide lines. Tanan. Haya bal kore rishon ubal chavis achron. So I'm person number one. I'm holding a 6-foot beam on my shoulder. Ubal chavis achron. A person behind me has a barrel of expensive wine. And nishbara chavis bekora, if the barrel bumps into the wine, pater. So that I'm person number one, but I didn't do anything. I'm just walking. So if you bump your barrel into the log that I'm holding on my shoulder, that's your fault, and I'm pater on that. But v'im amad bal kora, if I stopped walking and then your barrel went into my beam and then I broke it, okay, then I'm chayiv. It's a Mishnah. It's not a pshita. It's a din.
No, but I mean, it's like it's smart. It's like simple.
It's so funny you say that because we don't say that in our culture. We don't say that in American law. It's always the person behind's fault. Back up. Keep a distance.
Okay, but the two are not necessarily.
No, I made the connection between the two, but in general, we tell the person who's driving behind, you need to keep a distance of 2 car lengths. Right. Like we have these. Whatever the multiple second rule is between your car and the car in front of you. Yeah, but here the Gemara is saying as a Mishnah that it's pashut to the Mishnah that if I stop walking out of the blue, I am accountable if you then bump into me. Asks the Gemara, my lav shamad lekatev to orchehu. Doesn't this mean that I'm stopping lekatev? This is a language found in other Maseches to adjust onto your shoulder. Sometimes when you're carrying, and we've all done this building sukkahs, you're carrying something, you're walking up the stairs, you're like, this is not going to be successful. So I need to pause and readjust. So I stop walking, I re-angle, and then I keep walking. That's the orchehu. And v'katani chayev. So why then would we be chayev to havalei lahazir? It must be that we have a raya from over here that you have to be mazhir. It's okay if you stop, v'katev, that's mutter to stop, but then open your mouth and say, I'm about to stop, just letting you know, slow down behind me. Put on your hazards, whatever the mashal is, because I'm about to stop. So you're going to bump into me. So let's keep things careful. And therefore, maybe we have a raya like Rav Nachman, that the din is to be mazhir, that the din is to verbally warn the person behind you. No, lo. The reason why you're chayiv over here is kisha amad lafush. You're in rishus harabim, and you didn't stop walking to adjust what you're carrying. You stopped walking to take a break. And it's not normal to take a break in the middle of Tui Avenue. You're in a public thoroughfare. You're in a Rosh Hashanah. You can't just stop and take a rest. And if you do, and someone bumps into you, you're held accountable. No, not about being mazir. You're an idiot. Pull off to the side of the road. That's why they make shoulders. That's it. Just go off to the side. Don't just stop walking while you're, otherwise you're going to be chayav. So I asked the Gemara, okay, I hear you. Good response. Aval amad lekatef mai. What would have been the din if taka out of the blue, I just was holding this 6 foot metal beam on my shoulder. I push it, stopped walking, and your barrel goes straight into it and it breaks. But would you have said pater? Would you have said, in fact, that the Baal HaKoreh, that I would have been pater? After all, Adatani Seifa, the Seifa says the following: V'im Amar lo Baal Habayis, V'im Amar lo leBaal HaChavis Amod pater. That if I would have told the Baal HaChavis to just stop walking, then I would have been pater. If that's true, well, then you should have written the Mishnah differently. Then liflog v'lisni b'dida. You should have written that distinction directly into the Mishnah. When do we say that the Baal Habayis, that the Baal HaKoreh, is chayev? That's when he stops walking just to take a rest, which is ridiculous. You're in the middle of the street. That's what we should have said, but we didn't say that. Why didn't we say that? Why didn't we make this distinction directly in the Brisa? So says the Gemara, even if a person stops just to rest, Kika Amar lo lebal chavis amod pater, that even though if lafush, typically I'm going to be held accountable, but if I'm going to take a rest and I announce it that I'm no longer chayiv, then I'm pater. That was the chiddush of the Mishnah, but no raya to Rab Nachman whatsoever in regards to needing to verbally announce that I am stopping. So therefore, no raya yet. We're going to try again. We're halfway down on Lamed Aleph, Lamed Aleph. And this is the pile-up case. It's not just 2 people involved, it's 3 people involved. Take a look at this clown car. Toshma, Hakadorin, V'hazagagin, people who make utensils, people who work with glass. Zagagin, it's kind of like reminiscent of Yom Kippur davening hamizagig, the one who makes glass. So it says the Gemara, if you have a person who makes utensils or a person who makes glass, one is walking after the other. Niskal harishon v'nafal. The first guy trips on his own self and he falls. V'niskal hasheni berishon, and the second guy in line trips on the first guy. V'ashlishi b'sheni, and the third guy trips on the second guy. What's the din? Rishon chayev b'nizkei sheni, v'sheni chayev b'nizkei shlishi. Says the Gemara that person number 1 is going to be accountable for the damages of person number 2, and person number 2 is responsible for the damages of person number 3. However, v'imachmas rishon naflu, if really everybody tripped over the first guy, including number 3, meaning if number 2 tripped over number 1, and number 3 tripped over number 1, but didn't trip over number 2, chayev b'nizkei kula, rishon chayev b'nizkei kula, he's obligated on everybody. But look at this last line of the Brisa. We're 2/3 of the way down. He's here zeh pturim. If everybody, oh wait, I'm falling. If I said it out loud, if I said it to person number 2, and then number 2 is about to trip, he says, wait, number 3 behind me, I'm about to fall, then pturin, then everybody's pater. What do we see from here? My lab, what we see from here is that they shouldn't have stopped walking without letting anybody know, and therefore you have to actually say something in order to be pater. Maybe we have a raya for the sheet of Rav Nachman. It says Gemara lo, they had time to stand up and they just didn't. They're like, ugh. They're like sitting there wallowing in pity, making fun of themselves. Did I just trip over my own stub toe? Was that me? They're sitting there making fun. Then the other guy trips and they could have stood up. So asks the Gemara, as we did in the previous place, okay, what would have been the din in this case? If in fact person number 1 or 2 couldn't stand up in time to cause damages for either 2 or 3, so then we would have said pturin. If that's true, adatani seifa, then the Brisa makes no sense. What does it say in the Brisa? If you want to say that by person number 1 warning number 2, and by person number 2 warning number 3 that they would have been pturin, then liflog v'lisni b'dida, it should have been stipulated explicitly in the Brisa. How so? When do we say that you're chayiv? That's when you had time to stand up and you didn't. But this is not what the Brisa does. The Brisa doesn't make this distinction. And if you couldn't stand up your pater, why didn't the Mishnah the Brisa make this distinction of liflog v'lisni b'dida? So says the Gemara, 5 lines from the bottom. Kamash malon, that even though you had time to stand up, If I have time to stand up, I do. I could have stood up, but I choose instead to say, guys, I fell. So then the guys behind me, oh, okay, Phil fell. I'm just going to stop walking now. Good. And number 2 has to warn number 3 also. Then no problem. Then everyone's going to be patur. But there's no raya expressly that you're obligated to say it. That's not the case. It's just that if you do, you're patur. So we don't have clarity here. The Gemara ends with this piece. So we don't have clarity as to who's right. Do we say that he has to actually warn, or does he have time to get up? It's a little bit unclear from the Gemara. And 4 lines from the Gemara, we're going to see 2 pieces of analysis of the brisa that we just learned, the brisa of the 3 people tripping. So we're going to analyze that brisa. This is a nice nuance from Rava. Amar Rava, listen carefully. Rishon chayev b'nizkei sheni. I, who was the first person of the 3 who fell, I am obligated in the damages of the second person, bein benizkei gufo, bein benizkei mamono. And here you need to listen carefully because there's a real subtlety here. Whether or not he was damaged by my guf or by my mamon, Rishon, that's me. But sheni, when we say that the second guy is chayev benezek shlishi, that's only benizkei gufo. Shlishi's only going to be held accountable if he is damaged by the body of number 2, but not if he trips on the chariot or on the animal of person number 2. Asks the Gemara.
It doesn't mean whether you damage the guy's body or his mamon.
Correct.
Whether he was damaged by your body or.
So if I'm Rishon and you're Sheni, so we'll see in the Gemara that that's an iteration, but that's not this iteration. So we'll see soon that that's the case. That we'll see soon that that's a possibility, but we end up rejecting that. So what's happening over here is that Rava is saying that Rishon, I'm going to be chayev in all of my damages to you if you got damaged on my guf or on my mamon, but Sheni is only chayev to Shlishi if Shlishi gets damaged by my guf, if I'm Sheni, but not by my mamon. So says the Gemara, I don't understand how all of this even makes any sense. I don't understand one way or the other. Iniskal posheahu. If we say that guy number 1 who tripped is considered a posheya, he was considered negligent. The question is in halacha, is being a klutz an ones, or how do we look at this person who trips all the time? Is that considered posheya or ones? That's what the Gemara wants to know. So if we say that niskal is posheahu, if we say that every time you trip you're a posheya, you just don't know how to walk, so then sheni nami l'chayev. Then the second person should also be chayiv because he tripped also. Why are we saying that his level of chiyuv is different than the Rishon? They should both be the same, which is like the Rishon has, which is bein begufo bein mamono. If Sheni gets damaged either by me, person number 1, or by my mamon of person number 1, the same thing should be true by Sheni, but it's not true. And iniskal la posheahu. And if tripping is not considered poshea but ones, then afilu Rishon namali pater. That you can't have it be that the burden of the Rishon to the Sheni and the burden of the Sheni to the Shlishi are different. If tripping is Poshea, then tripping is Poshea. And then the din should be the same from person 1 to 2 as it is from 2 to 3. And if it's not, then it's not. But you can't have this reality where person number 1's obligations to 2 are different than person number 2's obligations to 3. That brings us to the top of Lamed Aleph Amud Beis. We're going to be stopping at the Mishnah, 5 lines from the bottom, and the Gemara says as follows. Rishon vaday poshehu, says the Gemara, in our case where person number 1 trips and then person 2 trips on 1 and person 3 trips on 2, Rishon vaday poshehu. Sheni agufo mechayev dehaylo lamod velo amad. The second guy only is charged with damages that happen to the Sheni's, the damages that happen to Shlishi with the Sheni's body. That's true because dehaylo lamod velo amad, because he should have stood up and he didn't. But I'm a monopater. But if person 3 gets damaged by the property of person 2, so person number 2 is pater on the mamon, to amarle haibira lav ona karise. I didn't dig this ditch. Meaning, you're right, person number 2, Sheni, that he now has a bor of Birshus Harabim, but he didn't create it. The guy who fell first created it. And therefore, we make this distinction between the obligation of Rishon to Sheni and the obligations of Sheni to Shlishi. The obligation of Rishon to Sheni is full throttle because Niskal is Poshea. That's what the top line of the page says. Rishon vaday Poshea. Therefore, when person number 2 gets damaged, either on Rishon's guf or mamon, full responsibility, full culpability. Masha'ein Kain, person number two, is not considered to be a poshea in regards to falling, but he needed to stand up, and he didn't stand up. His mammon that's there, that's a bor, but he didn't create the bor. Person one created the bor. So therefore, we're able to see this distinction between the Rishon and the Sheni. Says the Gemara, I still don't understand. Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, 3 lines down. Meisvei, hold on. We said, Kulan chayavin al nizke gufan, upturin al nizke mamonon. We have a brisa that says that everyone is obligated if they are damaged by the body. So if Sheni gets damaged on Rishon's body, then he's chayev. But upturin al nizke mamonon, but any damage that's caused either by person 3 or 2 on, respectively, people 2 or 1, if there's a damage on the mammon, then they're patur. So says the Gemara, my lava filu b'rishon. Doesn't this also apply to the first person? How can you tell me that the Rishon is obligated to pay ben benizke gufo ben benizke mamono? Over here, this brisa says it's only on his guf, not on the mamono. So says the Gemara, lo lebarmi Rishon. No, we're going to exclude the first case for seemingly some arbitrary reason. You can't just say it. You have to show some Mari Makomo. Says the Gemara, that doesn't work. The kulam katani. It says kulam, all 3 people. It doesn't mean not person number 1. All 3 people means all 3 people. So just, why are you, the brisa is difficult. Amaravata bar Ava, kulan hanizakin. Only the people who are negatively impacted by person number 1. The kulan is not on all 3. The kulan was on those who were damaged because of the tripping. So that excludes person number 1. Person number 1 tripped, he's a poshea. People 2 and 3, they were nizakim, they got damaged. Says the Gemara, hi mai. Wait one second. What is going on here? We're a quarter of the way down. Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, 8 lines down. I understand if you want to say that the word kulan applies to person 1, 2, 3. That makes perfect sense to me. I got it. My kulan. I don't even understand. You can't. So then say hanizakin, my kulan. Listen hanizakin. If you want to say in the brisa that when it said kulan that it meant nizakin, say nizakin. Don't make it confusing. Kulan means everybody. Nizakin means people 2 and 3. Kulan says 1, 2, and 3. That doesn't even make any sense. Elo Amar Rava, perhaps, and this is what you were saying earlier. Yaakov, the Gemara says, Elo Amar Rava, perhaps Rishon Chaye Ben Beniske Gufo Desheni Ben Beniske Mamono Desheni. Perhaps what's going on in the brisa is that person number 1 is obligated to pay for the damages that happened to person number 2, whether or not the damages were to the body of person number 2 or to the mammon of person number 2. The second person, as it relates to the damages of the third, it's only b'nizkei gufo, avalo b'nizkei mamono my time. Why do we make a distinction between the damages that the first person has to pay versus the second halfway down? Tahavale bor, v'lo matzinu bor shechai bo sakenim, because a bor is never obligated to pay for kalim that fall into it, only for the short. So maybe that works. Says the Gemara, well, it works for some people. Hanicha l'Shmuel da'amar kol takala borhu. That's true according to Shmuel, who says that any takala, any stumbling block in the public domain is considered to be a bor. Elo the Rab de Amar iafgere in ilolo ma'ikala memar. According to Rab, and we've seen this earlier, Rab says that there's a big difference between a bor that is able to be mufkar and a bor that's not able to be mufkar. But when what you're dealing with is a human being, you can't be mafkir person number 2. So therefore, the Gemara says, La'olam kid amar me'ikara. Therefore, we have to go back to our first understanding of Rava. Rava's first explanation was, and this is how we conclude with this Gemara, which is that when we say that the Rishon is obligated to pay for the damages to Sheni, that means that if the Sheni gets damaged on the guf of the Rishon or with the mamon of the Rishon, then person Rishon is obligated to pay everything. Kulan. What about the Brisa Kulan Chayavin, which is 4 lines from the top of the page? We have different cases. One case is talking about the guf, and that's what Kulan Chayavin is, and everyone is Chayav on guf. But when it comes to kalim, everyone's patur from the kalim because they're in a bor. Amar Mar, let's analyze one last piece of the brisa we learned on the bottom of Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph, and then we will stop for the day. Amar Mar, we had learned imachmas rishon naflu, that if both men, numbers 2 and 3, tripped over person number 1, then rishon chay b'nizkei kulam. So says the Gemara, machmas rishon hechi nafil. What's the case where people 2 and 3 tripped over person number 1? Rav Papa Amar de Pascal Urche Kishilda, where person number one laid across the road lengthwise, Kishilda, which literally means a corpse. That's what Rashi says. Where is that Rashi? I marked it off. 3 lines from the bottom of the page. Kishilda, Kinevela. I don't recall ever seeing this word. Anybody? Shilda? Any recollections? I don't ever recall seeing it, but I'm sure we learned it at some point. Anyways, the Gemara says that if a person number one lays across the street lengthwise and everybody trips on him, that's our case where two.
It's a meetup.
Oh, it's yeah. Oh, Sholdo Kayemes, yeah.
No, I have no recollection, never seen that word before.
Yeah, but in this, seeing the word Kayemes next to it actually does. Yeah, not distinctly though. That's answer number one. Rav Zvid argues in Amar, no, it's kichutra de samyusa. It's where person number one, he has like a blind stick. Chutra is a stick, and samyusa is a person who's blind. So that is the case scenario. That's what Rashi says. Kemakal shel sumen, 2 lines from the bottom. Kemakal shel sumen, like the staff of a blind person. She megashe shasuma bo upamim shumoshita lerochav haderech umegashesh. So it's gentle distinctions, but the same idea where one person tripped both people. According to some of the Meforshim here, the reason why Rav Zvid had to argue on Rav Papa is because the flow of events is that person number one laid across the road, and person number two got hurt, and then person number three got hurt. So person number three and person number two had a time gap between them, which means that there should have been some warning for person number three not to trip. So that's why Rav Zvid doesn't like the answer. So let's say, for example, we know now that when people are blind, they have a walking stick and they move it right to left and they tap so that they have some type of acoustic feedback. They can feel things, they can hear things. So I went like this, I tripped one guy and I tripped another. That's the case of Rav Zvid. Because they all happened in such close sequence. But Rav Zvid does not like the case of Rav Papa. So that's why Rav Zvid concluded that when our Brisa says that persons 2 and 3 tripped over person 1, it had to be a case where they fell in closer sequence. We'll stop right here. Emir Hashem will pick up tomorrow with the Mishnah on the bottom of Lamed Aleph and the Beis. Wishing you all a beautiful night.